Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying back. I know it's been a long day. Thank you very much. Like what Alfred said, it's already good evening, so I really appreciate that. Right, I'm Susan. Together with me is Yati. We are from Center for English Language Communication, and today we are going to just share a little bit about future-proof workplace communication and storytelling. All right, we were told that this is slightly different from many other classes and talks today because it's about very soft element of soft skill. So I hope there will be something useful or thought-provoking that we can take away and learn together in our short sharing today. All right, so as our colleagues have mentioned earlier, we are using a Slido as well for you to share any questions you might have and also participate in the poll that we have. So colleagues who are online with us virtually, please do participate as well as colleagues who are here. So, to start, all right, since I'm going to be talking about future-proof or future workplace communication, I'd like us to share, I'd like to know your thoughts, all right? What are the communication skills that you think are critical for the workforce of the future? Could you just maybe put in some thoughts you might have on Slido? Right, and let's see what we have. Music is important, silence is not. All right, listening, personal branding. Yeah, I think Ms. Chavin Low earlier this afternoon also talked about personal branding, influencing, active listening, lovely. Right, guiding conversations, very nice. Good, okay. Persuasion, email, critical thinking, being concise. Right. Okay, they're coming, all right, good. Peer sharing. Feedback giving, being empathetic, managing tensions, exactly. As you can see, the two words listening and influencing, they are getting bigger and bigger. Right, okay. Mindful speech, excellent. Juggling expectations, great. I think more than half of what I'm going to share, they're already here. So we already knew, and that is perfect, that's wonderful. All right, thank you for sharing, and for those of you who are still sharing, really appreciate that. Perhaps we'll just go on to the slides now in the interest of time. I saw conflict management as well. All right, great. So I'm just going to share in the context of what you're thinking about in terms of the future communication skills in the workplace in the future, right? Some thoughts and research that I've come across and put together for today. Right, so how can the human make the connection in a very digital or digitalized future that we are going to be in? I thought this picture is really apt for that. And in my research, all right, looking at McKinsey and also PricewaterhouseCoopers, they published two different papers just last year. And this is a summary of what they've said, all right? To stay ahead in the labor market is more automated, digital. Dynamic executives like you and me, all right, you and I, we need to be able to add value beyond what can be done by automated systems, intelligent machines. We need to continually adapt, not only in the way we work, but in the way we think as well. And the last point is particularly interesting. We need to be able to retain a core sense of identity and value. And that begs the question about what it means to be human. All right, quite a lot to unpack. All right, so it's okay if you cannot remember anything. I've summarized it further with this quote. All right, it's not the plane, it's the pilot. All right, it's not the machine, but it's the person operating it. Does this quote look familiar to any of you? Has any of you seen or heard this quote recently? All right, I am borrowing from the glamour of Top Gun Maverick, and that's from Mr. Tom Cruise. So if you can't remember what I said, never mind. Remember Tom Cruise, all right? It really is the person, not the equipment or the technology. It's not the plane, it's the pilot. All right, what do I mean by that? You know, we are moving on further and further. We talk about transformation, digital economy today, and clearly we are going to perfect that robots. All right, automation, they're going to get better and better, even though, you know, they do show up tendencies and biases as machine learning get more sophisticated as well. But then where is the place for human beings? All right, so I would like to advocate that we need to be better human beings. We're not competing in terms of speed, in terms of accuracy with the robots. But how can we still look back deep into our core and be better in the way we communicate and interact, and therefore make ourselves continuously viable in the workplace and as a person as a whole. All right, so we always talk about competencies, right, in the workplace, KPI, competencies. In HR, we talk about competencies. So actually, I showed this first. I want to say that competencies is no longer about the way the robots are being competent. All right, the competency that we still have to have and be stronger in is that sense of human touch. So I advocate the importance of human touch in the way we interact with people, colleagues, clients, and counterparts and stakeholders. All right, in Chinese, those of us who know Mandarin Chinese, you probably can see these 3 characters and recognize as 人情味. All right, in Chinese, we call, this human touch as 人情味. Very literally translated by this bilingual teacher. It's the flavor of humanity. What it means to be human in the way we interact, in the way we kind of live. All right, the impression with other people. Is the aftertaste a good one after people interact with us? That literally is the flavor of humanity. Could I just elaborate a little further? Okay, let's take a look at this photograph, all right? So that's me working from home, taking props from home. Just a couple of weeks ago, I celebrated my birthday, all right? I received many cards, including digital ones, all right? Digital ones from my boss. Okay, but I have some hard copy cards, all right? So these are some of them. Okay, one of them, particularly being very biased, shown up is the one in green from my 8-year-old godson. It says, I love you, Godma. I don't know whether you can see that. Okay, he's 8 years old. He just learned to make pop-up cards like this. All right, so, nowadays with digital photography, you can take pictures. We can, keep all this very easily. But I still like to keep them, store away the hard copy cards. But in a few years' time, when I start to, housekeep, I may need to just throw out some of them and keep some. All right, which card do you think I will keep? Which card do you think I will keep? The green one, right? My godson's card. All right. Actually, the one in pink on the left is also a handmade card from a very dear friend. The rest are printed cards that can be bought off the stores. All right. So the messages are great. All right. They are heartfelt. But the card in green made by my godson is going to make a very different and take a very different place in my heart. All right, I'm going to keep it for a long time, if not just to make fun of him when he turns 21. Okay, another example, all right, Singaporeans, we like to talk about food. So the item on the left side is my home-cooked noodles, one of my lockdown cooking, right, okay? And the one on the right is definitely a lot more polished from a restaurant, from a website, nicely garnished. Okay, when we talk about food, sometimes we talk about comfort food. Food that we want to eat when we are down, all right, we are discouraged, mom's cooking, or as the Italian says, nonna's pasta, all right, grandma's cooking. That flavor that we distinguish, we identify with, is different, all right? Even though when we want to perhaps entertain a client, we are likely to bring him or her to a posh restaurant with nice pasta like the one on the right. But my point here is this: what is going to sustain an impression? What is going to be the unique, distinguishable human touch that will be remembered by, that's unique? All right, that's what I meant by the human competency, human touch. That's important, right? So enough of my own thoughts and conclusion about what human touch is about. Let's look at what research has said. Okay, so this is from McKinsey & Company again. So they spent quite a number of years speaking with more than 100 sectors, over 1,000 professionals in different fields, and they came up with this 56 foundational skills for the future of work, and they organized it in these 4 categories. All right, 4 categories. You can see them. Okay, earlier this afternoon, Ms. Chalvin Loh from SSG also talked about the different sets of skills and categories. I'm so glad there's an overlap here, actually. But I just want to highlight a few of them. In fact, quite a lot of them. Firstly, the importance of communication in our cognitive development, cognitive skills, right? The importance of presentation and storytelling, this is what Yati is going to talk about later. Asking questions, active listening, synthesizing messages, making it meaningful. It's always important. Self-leadership takes up a whole quadrant, right? The importance of self-leadership, which is about self-awareness, being aware of our emotions, our thoughts, what drives us, what motivates us, what is our trigger. All right, I'm going to spend just a bit more time on self-leadership because I'm going to advocate that it really undergirds our interpersonal communication, which takes up another quadrant. So as you can see, the human-related communication skills remain very important. All right, so the question for us is, how do we harness and get better and better, right? So, self-leadership, this is another finding from Deloitte Insights. All right, so he proposed that, in the paper they proposed that, workforce of the future, it really starts with self-leadership, okay? And they describe it as emotional fortitude and metacognition. So metacognition is that sense of awareness of our own thoughts, our own emotions, what do we feel, how do we feel, why do we feel that way with certain issues or people, and so on. All right, being able to look it squarely in the face, being honest about it to begin with is very important. So there are 3 points about emotional fortitude and metacognition. The first one is about being mindful of our own emotions, including the negative ones, not denying or shying away from the negative ones. So this idea about being mindful is quite literally holding our thoughts and our emotions in our hands, all right, taking out what's on our mind, our brain, and being able to label it. How do I feel about this client? How do I feel about working with this team member, talking to my boss, having that difficult conversation, and so on. Being able to really talk to ourselves and being aware of how we feel, all right, what we think, before we can then go on to the second step, which is to communicate. It's only when we are honest with ourselves, we know what we think, then we can decide, all right, so how am I going to plan my communication episode with this person? I'm going to set realistic expectations. I can't maybe talk about all 5 points in my agenda, maybe just 2. It will be a winner already. All right, so being able to communicate and explain decisions is not just about speaking well, although that's important, but we have to first of all be very clear about our own biases or even prejudices, and then be able to organize, all right, what would be a winning goal in our conversations. And at the end of that process, the whole episodes of interaction, decision-making, we are able to then again squarely, honestly reflect on the decision-making process as well as the consequences or outcome. All right, reflecting on it. Again, it takes honesty, it takes openness. Okay, I want to unpack this further, all right? I just want to drive a little deeper to give us some questions, prompts, okay? When we talk about being mindful of our own emotions, it could be asking ourselves questions. What do I feel about this assignment? What do I feel about going back to the office instead of working from home? What do I feel about working with this client whom the rest of my colleagues don't really want to work with, right? Okay, what are my triggers? What caused me to feel a certain way? Right? What caused me to feel a little more anxious, and so on. All right, what could I do to regulate, especially if it's negative emotions? So we need to work through that, work past that, instead of just complaining about it, all right, feeling sleepless about it. We talk about mental wellness these days, and this is about mental wellness, the mindset of, looking at our own emotions is the first step to mental wellness. And the end goal of doing this is to then become self-aware. All right, being very aware of what's going on, what's driving me, and therefore, what can I do about the meeting I'm going to have? All right, the difficult conversations I'm going to start with someone who is notoriously, a bit resistant, right? Okay, and of course, we need to take ownership of our own emotions, our own feelings, and the next step. So in the next step, we are going to communicate and explain decisions, all right? Having gained that self-awareness and self-knowledge, we can be much more effective in the way we prepare that communication process. And that drills down to how we organize information and use technology tools, all right? These are enablers. We have so many of them, and they're getting better and better. But it's how we leverage. It's not just jumping on the bandwagon to use the latest, but what drives our decision to use which tool and why we think that tool will work best with the target audience we're going to speak with. That is the human touch, the human factor that's going to make a difference from just letting the machine make the decision for us, right? Okay, so, the next 2 points are the more human touch, human-related points. Which explanation do I need to go deeper to foster buy-in with my target audience? So when we have our self-awareness, we begin to gain awareness as to what our target audience is about, what they are like, okay? And then how can I explain clearly, persuasively? The end goal of this step is really to be clear and to be transparent. Now, when I mean transparent, does not mean you share and disclose everything. We all know that in the workplace, we can't disclose everything, right? But as human, we have the intelligence to be selective, right? We can be selective about what we can share and the reasons we can provide in order to foster buy-in, to get the other party to understand. It's not just disclosing 4 out of 10 points, but which points and which points do I prioritize, okay? It's also about inspiring trust as a result. Right? So trust, when we want to inspire or gain trust, it's not about just doing whatever the other party wants. It's not about giving them exactly what they want. It's not. It's letting the other party know that you are being as open as you can, letting the other party know that, hey, your hands are also bound in some way, but you're trying to be helpful or as helpful as you possibly can. And that is how the relationship between you and your counterparts can get better and deeper, right? And the last part, I think, is the most difficult part, all right? It's the mindset. It's a mindset thing, really, like what Chalvin said earlier. Reflecting on our own feelings, reflecting about the decision process and consequences. Okay, what went well, what didn't go well, all right? In the army, they say AAR or something like that, right? After action review, okay? How do I feel about the consequences? What can I improve on? And there's one last question that's quite important. Who could I ask for honest and constructive feedback? Do I want a mentor? Can I have a mentor or even just a colleague who can give me honest feedback? So are we ready? All right, this is very difficult because it takes a lot of humility to give people permission to tell us our mistakes and how we can improve on. But it's so powerful and empowering as well. So the end goal here is becoming increasingly a more and more open person and to develop that confidence, having failed, all right, to improve and get better. Okay, so these are the points that they are going to start off by differentiating us. But you may be wondering at this point, right? So how does this lead us to interpersonal communication? All right, so right now I'm just going to pause a little while. I'm going to ask you to just check and look at yourself, your own posture. How are you sitting? I saw some of you leaning forward, some of you leaning back, all right, a few folded arms and so on. Okay, are you doing this? Are you smiling? Is it because you're already tired? It's been a long day. You don't know what I'm talking about, what I'm driving at, where am I going to end, right? All right, the point here is this. I just want to drive across the point that how we feel about an issue, a topic, all right, even what we are listening right now, okay, has a direct physiological relation to our body language. Okay, let me try again. All right, can I ask you, what do you do over the weekend? Just the weekend that's just passed. Do you do anything fun, interesting, families, friends? Yeah, because half the faces are covered, I can't quite see, but I can see a couple of people smiling, thank you. All right, I can see your eye contact with me. I don't know virtually at home whether you are sitting up, all right, your shoulders just relax a little, just thinking about fond memories of what happened over the weekend. The way we associate with a topic and issue has a direct correlation physiologically, right, in the way we react. And that means our body language, our eye contact, our gestures, the way we listen, the way we smile as well. So I'm not going to use this masterclass to say, oh, this is an open gesture, this is how you make eye contact. We know about that, we can easily research about that. But just know that self-awareness, self-knowledge is extremely powerful and important because you like it or not, that is how it will naturally affect the way we interact and conduct interpersonal communication. Just having a strong handshake, sustaining a smile and so on, those are important, but it's not going to be sustainable, right? In fact, it can be very tiring if we don't feel that comfortable with the issue we're talking about, with the person we are engaging with, okay? Right, so allow me to just cascade, all right, some of the things I have said in a little more text than previous slides. Okay, how does self-leadership lead to interpersonal communication? All right, being aware of our own emotions, our strengths, our own blind spots will open us to new opinions, new information. All right, that can come from ourselves, that can come from others. And the self-awareness will also open us up, hopefully, ideally, to a more objective view of others' motivation when they interact with us. All right, having known that, okay, I have this bias, I have this fear or anxiety about speaking with this person. Okay, fine, all right, I adjust, I deal with it, and then, okay, let's be more open and objective when I deal with this person. Not every word is meant to be sarcastic. All right, now that I know that, okay, that's because I'm aware of it, and so on. Self-awareness shapes our motivation in the way we conduct interpersonal communication. Once we know, we we know what we need to do in a communication, we set realistic goals, for instance, in a difficult conversation, in a meeting, it can motivate the way we enter into that conversation. And of course, our motivation in communication will guide the way we use our body language or our non-verbals. Okay, right. So Stephen Covey, when he talks about 7 habits of highly effective people, right? So I like this one that he says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. I agree completely, it's wonderful, but I just want to sneak in a little bit, additional point here. Seek first to understand self, then to be understood. All right, we need to understand ourselves first before we really go out there. Be the authentic person, interact with others. That's where we begin to give people permission to understand us and understand us accurately or right. Okay, we have to seek first to understand ourselves. So what does this look like, all right, in interpersonal communication? I've been talking about openness. So openness, as I mentioned, physiologically, what is in our mind affects our body language. So openness in our non-verbal cues, all right? The open posture, gesture, leaning forward, these are important. But more importantly, qualitatively, openness is about communicating with understanding, or at least the other party has to feel understood, and empathy. All right, what does understanding, what does empathy look like? Let me just use this picture. Okay, this could be 2 friends talking. One of them could be sharing good news or a joke. We can see that the body language is mirroring. In fact, I don't know who is the one talking and who is the one listening. All right, but you can see that both parties are fully engaged with each other, right, through their eye contact, through their leaning in, and so on. And that is a conversation that you can see both parties are involved in enthusiastically. There's understanding. How about empathy? I just want to use this adorable picture of 2 dogs, all right? Empathy, all right? Good friends, all right? Carrying a log. One of them could be thinking, it's a fine sunny day at the beach, right? I'd rather be playing in the water than carrying this silly log along. But my friend wants to do it. I can see why it's fun for him. Okay, let me do it. So when we empathize, we may not necessarily approve or agree, but we can still support and go along and show understanding with our friend in that activity that we do. So openness, understanding, empathy, truly that drive the difference between good interpersonal communication with human touch and just having the right handshake, the right smile, and so on, right? So allow me to just indulge and look at my godson's lovely card again. Okay, what does human touch, flavor of humanity mean? If you may agree with me, right, these are some descriptions, okay, if you think about his card, all right, especially, okay, it is somewhat unpolished, all right, flawed. It's unlike the printed card, so perfect, okay, it's inconsistent, but it's also not reproducible, okay, it is unique and it is authentic. Human touch is unique, it's authentic, it is warm, it's personalized, and also allow me to use the word curated. I last checked, the word curated means selected, organized information by a professional expert. All right, so in our interaction with every individual we come across, can it be curated? Not in a sense like it's a perfect smile, it's a perfect tone of voice and so on, no. All right, I'm not talking about the chatbot that is incessantly patient. I'm sorry, please try again. U-turn in 200 meters. All right, very patient, but increasingly very frustrating for humans to hear their patient voice when we are already frustrated. We would rather have a human who really understands our frustration or be equally frustrated as us. So curated experience, what does it exactly mean for you in your interaction with your clients, with your colleagues? All right, if I may just give a few descriptions, it could be an occasional use of Singlish. It need not be perfect grammar or English all the time. Just because, this could be someone from overseas, interested in our very Singaporean culture, can share something Singlish, all right, fun with them. Okay, our small talk, what we think about to use as small talk, is appropriate because we know our target audience's demographics. All right, whether they have children, they like Liverpool or not, or they support Crystal Palace, I don't know. So what's the right thing to say and what is not the right thing to say? All right, in the sense of humor. Right? Curated stories, analogies that would be suitable, that will help them to understand better. All right, I really enjoyed this morning Professor Ho's sense of humor when he was, telling us about the Career Plus app, especially when he said, all right, if you have returned these skills to your teacher, you can delete it from the app. I don't know whether you remember that. It's a very Singaporean way of saying, right? When you say return to the teacher, what does that mean? I don't think people overseas really understand. It really means that we forgot what we have learned, okay? So curated is actually very unique, all right? And with different people we interact with. Don't use the same joke, recycle the same joke, and all that. You'll fall flat after a while, you know. Even teachers, we realize we need to change our examples. And of course, in terms of our nonverbal cues, all right, we use suitable tone of voice, suitable facial expressions. It can't be plastered smile all the time. All right, so how does it look like, all right, in terms of our body language? Okay, it's all about this term that y'all have mentioned earlier, active listening. And active listening, in short, is two main words: being fully present. All right, it's really about nodding at the right time, smiling, using utterances like wow, oops, wow, ouch, at the right time. All right, it's not mechanical, but it's very appropriate, it's very suitable. Okay, it's not about thinking, okay, what I'm going to say next. This person has been talking about his quarantine experience. What am I going to say next? Honestly, I don't even have my passport now. So, right, it's not about, okay, thinking, turn taking, right? What am I going to say next? It's not. It's really asking an appropriate question after that. So, how do you feel? Were you excited? You don't sound that happy about going back to work. Why? All right, that person will feel listened to, understood at least, okay, because you are following through. And that can be seen in the facial expressions, posture, and the appropriate verbal responses, utterances. How about empathy? So I've talked about empathy earlier. It's really about understanding. This could, how does it sound like? It could be you're talking to a client and you recommend plan A, all right, and your client is sharing with you, all right, the difficulties. We don't have the bandwidth to support plan A, or we don't have the budget. Plan B sounds more suitable, but I know plan B is not for my sector, all right, so I'm sorry. And you go back, you discuss with your team, you discuss with your boss. The next day, through email or through conversations, you explain to your client again, right, I'm sorry, we can't, okay, but this is what we can do. We can adapt plan B a little for you. Or it could be just plainly all bad news, I'm sorry, and you reiterate the reasons you've mentioned the day before. But your clients will be very appreciative because you took the effort to listen, to understand specific contextualized constraints that he or she is experiencing. And you go back, you walk through it with your team and see, is there anything you could do just for this client? And you take the time to explain. Right? Remember, we are not competing with robots in terms of speed, efficiency, or even accuracy. But what's going to set us apart is we listen with our hearts. Right? We listen with our hearts and we respond with our hearts as well. Okay, each correspondence, each interaction is unique, is warm, is personalized. That's going to make a difference. And that's going to foster trustworthiness, which is not about giving them what they want all the time, right? But it's to demonstrate that we are paying attention, we are listening, and we are trying our best to help. Okay, so that demonstrates trustworthiness, support. Right, so I have come to the end of my segment of the sharing. Okay, I just want to reiterate that we are not competing with the robots. They're going to be perfect in one way or another. But let's think about how we can be better as humans, all right? Better humans, okay? And that involves, firstly, a clear, strong self-leadership, self-awareness, self-understanding. That should ideally lead us to be more open intrapersonally for ourselves, interpersonal in our interaction. And in our interpersonal communication, in the way we interact with others, what's going to make a difference is the competency of human touch that is necessarily flawed or inconsistent. All right? And in our interaction, it really means being fully present for other people. Okay? Right, if you can remember many of the things I've said, I hope you remember Tom Cruise and Top Gun. It's not the plane, it's the pilot. All right, so that's all I'm sharing with you today. Thank you so much for your attention. Yati.
Thank you. I'm going to be sharing with you about storytelling and other rhetorical tools for audience engagement. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to dive, before I dive into the topic, I wanted you to do a quick poll. Can we have the poll? Yeah. So those of us joining from home, could you also take part in this? Yeah. Okay, great. I'm interested to learn more. Some of you are already using storytelling, but you're interested to learn more. 61%. 30%, okay, say you're keen to learn. And then 5%, not sure if you will be any good at it. 2%, I'm great at it. Okay, great, all right. So in the interest of time, can we go back to the slides, please? Thank you. Okay, so now in the audience is a friend of mine. Her name is Jane Doe. Now, Jane is really an introvert. She's working with a certain company X, and she doesn't do very well when it comes to giving presentations. This is something that she finds very challenging. She knows her stuff very well, but she's just not able to engage her audience. All right? She really admires people who make really good presentations and are able to engage their audience. Some of her colleagues are like that. They made it look so easy, so effortless, but Jane struggles. So she's here today to hopefully learn something useful from the session, and I hope I will not disappoint her. All right, so let us continue. I'm going to take you through this journey, all right, where I'm going to be sharing with you 3 things. And in this journey, we are going to visit different countries. We are going to meet with some very interesting people. We are going to also meet some very familiar faces in Singapore and visit some familiar places in Singapore. And hopefully, we are also going to be able to learn something about storytelling and rhetorical devices. All right? So let's start the journey. And I'm going to start with telling stories. Our first stop is Oxford, England. And this is Daniel Pink giving a talk on the puzzle of motivation. In this talk, he shared a personal anecdote at the beginning of the presentation. And it's really about him joining a law school, all right, which he regretted, all right, but because he didn't do very well. But at this talk, he's going to make use of his legal skills in order to make a case for how businesses should be run. All right. So by doing this, or by making this sharing, he's actually making the presentation a little bit more interesting. He's personalizing his sharing, all right, by sharing this anecdote at the start. And in the entire presentation, that was what he did. He presented evidence and he built a case as to how businesses should be run. And that kind of frames the presentation quite nicely. All right? So that makes it more interesting. Our next stop is Stanford University. And this is somebody I'm sure many of you know, or if not all of us knows him, all right, Mr. Steve Jobs. All right, so this was a presentation that he was giving to Stanford graduating class. And in this talk, some of you may have listened to this talk or watched this talk. If you recall, he shared 3 stories. One of the stories that he shared is about love and loss, all right? So here, what was the story about? Okay, here he was telling the audience about how at the age of 20, he and his partner started Apple. All right? And within 10 years, Apple grew to a $1 billion company. But at the age of 30, he found himself fired from Apple. Can you imagine being fired from your own company? But he was fired, all right? And what happened after that was really devastating, as you can imagine, okay? But upon reflection, he actually thought that being fired from Apple was the best thing that could have happened to him because he became less sure about everything, and he entered into the most creative periods of his life. So what happened in the next 5 years was he set up 2 very successful companies, Next and Pixar. And in a very remarkable turn of events, Apple bought Next, and Steve Jobs found himself back in Apple. All right, so that's quite remarkable. He attributed, all right, why he was able to kind of go through this difficult period of his life is because of the love that he had for the work that he did, all right? And remember that the audience that he was addressing at this time was a Stanford graduating class. So he had a very clear purpose of why he was sharing this story. He wanted to pass down to them a core message, and that core message is to not lose faith, even when life gets hard, and to really find something that you love to do, because with this, it can get you through these tough times, and to not settle for anything less. All right. So it was very purposeful. It was very, very effective. All right, in terms of the takeaway for the audience. Our next stop is we're going to meet someone from Bangladesh. If you don't know him, Muhammad Yunus is an economist. He's a social entrepreneur. All right. So in this talk, he was sharing the conversation that he had with the chairman of Danone, and in that story that we see here, he was just relating basically the conversation that he had between himself and the chairman of Danone. Right? So you see quotation marks everywhere there. What he shared in this particular story is how the Grameen Danone company in Bangladesh started, all right, through a chance meeting with the chairman of Danone. And in the highlighted bit, what you see there is how he explained the concept of social business to the chairman of Danone. So he was not only explaining the concept of social business to the chairman of Danone in the story that he shared, but at the same time, he was explaining the concept of social business to the audience present at that time. All right? So a story can also be like this, where you relate a conversation that you had with someone. All right? Okay, so up to this point, we have seen speakers sharing stories, personal stories and anecdotes about their lives and their experiences. Are there any other ways of telling stories or incorporating stories into your presentation? Let's take a look at this. We see here characters being used to represent the target customers. At the top there, we see Miss Tan, all right, who is saving for her new home. And then below, Mr. Tan, not related to Miss Tan, all right, who is actually accumulating money for his retirement. So you could actually use characters, all right, to represent your customers or clients. And you could use characters, you could introduce characters into your presentation to make it engaging as well. Let me illustrate this. First of all, okay, when you use characters for customers, we need to know who our customers are. Who are they? What are their pain points? And what are their needs? When you answer these questions, you can then create a character that would be relatable to your target consumers. Let me illustrate this with an example. All right, supposing we are in the business of co-working spaces, all right? And we're talking about a target group here, co-working spaces for working parents. Working parents who have children at home, all right, they still want to work, but they want to have their children close by. So what are the pain points? It's constant disruption from kids when they're working from home. And the needs, they want a space where they can focus on their work, but they also have kids close by, and they have the peace of mind that they're in good care. Right. So we can create a co-working space for working parents that include childcare facilities and a school and so on. All right. So with this knowledge or analysis of your target consumers, you could create a character, something like that. All right. And that's quite easy. So, but first of all, we must know who our target consumers are. When you create that character, it does two things, all right? First, it humanizes your market segment. And second, all right, it enables your target consumers to actually see that, okay, you understand my pain points. You understand what my needs are. And that's quite powerful, all right? Because they have this connection. They can identify with that character. Okay, let's move on. Okay, by the way, co-working spaces for working parents is not my idea. This already exists, and I was quite fascinated by that. I was like, okay, that's really wonderful. Okay? So it's Treehouse. Okay, so what have we learned so far? These are the things that we've learned from what we've seen so far. From Daniel Pink, we understand that we can actually use stories in order to personalize our sharing, in order to frame our presentation. From Steve Jobs, we learned that we can share life lessons and values, and we can inspire change or encourage a certain mindset. And from Muhammad Yunus, we learned that we can explain complex concepts simply and interestingly. And from the use of characters, we can make clear and concrete whatever it is that we want to share, because these are concrete examples. And we can also demonstrate that we understand the situation or the struggle that our target consumers are going through. All right? So this is storytelling. All right? So now let's move on to the next part of our journey, where we're going to employ rhetorical tools. First of all, what are rhetorical tools? They are devices that go beyond the meaning of words to create effects that are creative and imaginative. Have you ever, let me just go back to that. Have you ever seen a sign, all right, somewhere outside, okay, where you think to yourself, okay, that's really catchy. Or you read something outside and you say, that's really a smart way of putting things across, all right? Very clever, because rhetorical devices are used all around us, all right? So here are some examples. Design, develop, defend. Very catchy. It's the use of alliteration, similar sounds at the start there, all right? And then below that, we're not a tech company that develops autonomous vehicles for everyday travel. We develop autonomous vehicles to see beyond and to better protect our soldiers. So it's a kind of turn of phrase. We are not this, we are this, all right? I'm sure the right-hand side there, the picture at the top, is familiar to many of us. I see some smiles here. Glide to the side for smoother rides, all right? Again, playing with the sound, ride, okay? And right at the bottom is a sign that I see at the gym that I go to. It's all right to be slow and steady. You're still winning the race. This is an allusion to the story of the tortoise and the hare. Some of us are familiar with that story, right? So this is an allusion. By the way, what I'm sharing with you are just some examples of rhetorical devices, because there are so many, right? And it's not possible for me to share everything. All right, so can some of these rhetorical devices be used in presentations? They can, and they will make our presentation more engaging. So let's take a look at Prof. Tan Chuan Chuan, right? This is our former NUS president, and this was a speech that he gave when he was stepping down as NUS president, and he was passing the reign to Prof. Tan Eng Chai, our current president. He used a metaphor, all right, of Chinese landscape painting to describe NUS. I'm just going to read to you what is highlighted in green, because to describe it will not have the same impact, right? For amateur Chinese landscape painters, one of the most dangerous situations is when the painting you're working on finally starts to look really good. There is great temptation to play it safe at that stage. The big test is to proceed boldly and with imagination, to place each new stroke powerfully and strategically, even changing the parts that already look pleasing, in order to transform a very good painting to a truly outstanding one. So basically, he's equating or likening NUS to a Chinese landscape painting that is already very good. How do you transform this piece of painting into something that is truly outstanding? If you play it safe, you may not actually produce the result. So we need to make bold moves, right? I thought that was really quite powerful, okay? Later on in that speech, all right, when he was passing a painting that he painted himself, he presented it to Prof. Tan Eng Chai, all right? He used an allusion, and he refers to the passing of the torch between the outgoing and incoming president, an allusion to the Olympic torch relay, right? So it's kind of passing the knowledge, wisdom, and so on from one generation to the next, all right? Okay, and then the metaphor continues at the end there. Okay, next. This is somebody we all know, I'm sure, right? And this is quite recent. It's a Chinese New Year speech that he made in January. PM Lee used a personification, all right? Marriage and birth numbers will come roaring back. What is personification? Personification is attributing some kind of a human or animal character, all right, to something that's inanimate. Right, so roaring is, we're talking about numbers here, that's inanimate, but he's using the verb roaring, and that's very, it's perfect because it's the year of the tiger, right? Then after that, at the bottom, the boldness of the beast is kind of alliteration. Okay, if you look at the highlighted bits there in red, roaring back, year of the tiger, strength of the tiger, the boldness of the beast, there is a theme there, which is very relevant to the context. All right? Imagine if Mr. Lee had said this, which was exactly what the meaning was. All right? Compare that to this, which has greater impact and which would engage the audience better. Okay? And this is very recent, okay, it's anaphora. Basically what it is the use of the same few words at the start of a phrase, and you kind of repeat it success in succession, all right? So that's anaphora there. Okay, so why use stories and rhetorical tools in order to make vivid or make memorable, and also in order to create interest and engagement with our audience? The use of stories do more than that, right? It evokes emotion. It also establishes connection with our audience, and it enables our audience to identify with the character or the situation that we're sharing. So it can be very powerful. How do we incorporate stories and rhetorical tools? Make sure that that it is relevant to the context, contextual relevance, that it is purposeful, all right, and that it is relatable. So just as we administer CPR, all right, in order to resuscitate life, we incorporate stories and rhetorical tools in order to bring life to our presentation. Okay, so let us bring everything together. I'm going to go through this very quickly. Storyboarding, all right. I'm just using the example from my talk. Okay, so when I started preparing for this talk, I had 3 things to share. It's over there, all right. So when I was thinking, okay, how do I make this talk more interesting, more engaging for my audience? I thought of 3 questions. Where can I incorporate stories, rhetorical devices? What examples do I use? Right? And how do I frame my presentation? And that results in this storyboard, okay? So that's where this is, all right? And in this storyboard, okay, I introduced Jane Doe. So she is facing challenges, all right? In the middle, I'm hoping to have given her some tools to overcome that challenge, and I hope in the end, she would feel that she can resolve this challenge that she's facing. So the framing of the talk using the journey is one, and then the use of these challenges, tools, and resolution is another kind of tool that I use in order to create coherence and unity for the entire presentation. And I hope I've been able to demonstrate that. Okay? So in closing, can we incorporate stories and rhetorical devices in all kinds of presentations? I believe we can, right? But I'm not going to go through this in very great detail. What you see there are different kinds of presentations and how we can incorporate stories and rhetorical devices. Okay, so to engage our audience, remember to use stories and rhetorical tools, remember CPR, and be creative and thoughtful in your storyboarding. I started this presentation by expressing hope that Jane will be able to gain something useful from this presentation. I hope she has, And I hope I'm able to convince the rest of you who are joining us here as well as at home that these tools can really make a positive difference in the way you engage your audience. And they are also skills that are really not that difficult to pick up. Thank you very much. So that's my storyboard. And so we are open now to the Q&A. If you have any questions, you can just post them, all right? And now Susan and I will try to address your questions. If you have any questions. Okay, there's a question that we saw about where do you find inspiration for stories, right? So let me just try to address that. I think the inspiration for stories is, of course, from our everyday lives experiences. For example, if something happened and it occurred to you that, okay, that's interesting. There is a potential story there. And if you could just jot that down somewhere, right, it might be useful for you to use in some future presentation. You could also, I suppose, look at, okay, I guess so, looking at what's happening around you and being very, very observant of what's happening and keeping maybe a kind of a log or a notebook about what's happening that's interesting. That's how you can find inspiration for stories. The other, I guess, is your life stories, all right? Your personal experiences. And of course, what I shared earlier, you could also use characters in order to create stories, all right? So those are just some inspiration for stories.
Okay, we have quite a number of very good questions about stories. Where can we how can we use it besides talks and presentations? And there's one particularly interesting about, whether you might risk coming across as being glib or stilted or artificial, right? Yeah, I think that's a very valid concern. I think the story has to be relevant. The story has to be relevant, don't overdo it, don't overhype. All right, try not to just do it for the sake of maybe entertaining, okay? So keep it brief and concise, but it has to be relevant to the point. Okay, and I agree with Yati that something that comes from your own life would be a lot more authentic, right? I chose the story about my godson, not only because it was just my birthday, I received a card. I thought it's really quite a difference between a handmade card, which is very rare now, coming from a kid, okay, compared to a corporate card, a printed card. All right, I just want to drive across that point. So I think that's where the human touch or selection comes in, right? When we want to choose a story or even think about how we want to put the story together in a very concise manner, we need to think about, is it relevant Okay, is it relevant? Is it going to be understood accurately? If there's a cultural gap, a cultural difference, we want to make sure that it won't cause any misunderstanding. Am I just showing off or what? Right? So being very mindful and sensitive in all these ways should help us to make good decisions in terms of the stories we choose and how are we going to say it at what moment. I hope that helps. Yeah, we are learning to use Slido. So humans being flawed, all right, so we are learning on the spot. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, what are the differences for data storytelling via online versus on-site, if any? Okay, that's an interesting question, right? Data storytelling on-site and in person. I suppose when we talk about data storytelling, which is I think a subject of another session, right? That's happening at the same time. But let me just attempt to respond to this. We're talking about using data, right, and being very aware of what is significant about the data that we want to highlight to our audience. All right. So I think whether it's on site or in person, I don't think there is a great difference there. That's what I think. Okay. Some ways we can start telling our daily lives.
Okay, there's a common theme, I think, where some of you asked about the number of stories you can tell and maybe causes to take and so on. I think it really comes back to things like relevance again, right? So how long is your presentation? At which point is the story useful? I think one of the things about storytelling is it's a great icebreaker. So if you want to use it at the start of that conversation in a presentation, I think it's good. All right, start with something that is very human-centered, something very relatable, but make sure it has some relevance, all right, to bring you into the topic proper. Or if you're trying to explain something technical, some techniques like rhetorical devices, analogies, can really help, all right, in bringing it down into simpler, more easily understood, palatable manner. So use that as a bridge, as a transition, before you then go into the figures, into something that is technical. As to causes,
As to causes, I mean, the session that we just shared with you, it's something that we can develop into a course where we can dive deeper into, what we just shared with you. So that's something that we can offer. All right. But where else you can find storytelling courses? I'm not really too sure about that.
okay, credibility. There's a question about credibility in the stories and the best way to know if the stories will work. And there's one more question about financial reporting, right? I think these are some of the questions. Maybe I'll just address quite quickly together. Credibility, if it's not your story, all right, no harm sharing with them. I came across this, I read this in the Straits Times, Washington Post. All right, I heard this from another person, a client. Of course, protect the other person by being anonymous. All right, or my cousin and so on. Just be honest, all right? It's not me, okay? It's someone else, right? So it's as simple as that. I think it's commonsensical, okay? If it's from somewhere, if it's a legend, you just say that, okay? And the one on credibility and okay, financial reporting, right? Actually, I think a lot of very technical people nowadays, they use stories, all right, and they use stories to look at data, to look at pattern. What does it mean? How does it translate? Okay, if the pattern shows an increase in a certain numbers, an increase or a decrease in certain numbers, what does it translate? And they often break it down into simple ratio or proportion. Like this means that with every 10 people needing the drugs, okay, only one person can afford it in 10 years' time. All right, this is just a very, very simple example on analogy. Okay, or if you want to extend it further and make it into a story like, a family income of this level compared to another level, what does it mean in the years to come if healthcare continues to be expensive? Okay, I'm just trying to, give you a very simple example.
One more. Finished? what is the adequate number of stories for a speech before it goes overboard? Okay, that's a good question, all right? I don't think we should try to incorporate too many stories. Again, it goes down, right, to the three key principles. Contextual relevance, all right? The story must serve a purpose, right? So you include stories not just for the purpose of including stories, but it really must serve a purpose, all right? And the last one is the story must be relatable, all right? You can just tell one story, but if that story is powerful, it will create the impact that you want, all right? So you don't have to tell a lot of stories, okay? Yeah. Okay, all right. Okay, so thank you again, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us today. That closes the Lifelong Learning Festival for this year. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you.